Man, that's the truth that there are just some things that lurk beneath the surface that are just killing us. Now, I gotta be honest with you. If we've gotten through several weeks now of this silent but deadly series, and I haven't made a lot of fart jokes, so I don't know how that has happened. To be honest with you, because when we first imagined this, I'm like, oh, this is gonna be fun, you know. But now, after several weeks of not making it, I feel like it's built up inside, but I'm afraid if I let it out that, hey, wait, this is the title of the series. So, okay, so just kidding. Some of you get it. So, but hey, we're wrapping up a series today called Silent but Deadly, because there are some things beneath the surface that are killing us. Some stuff that just, if it is not, it doesn't make a noise, it doesn't make any kind of obvious real impression in our life, but man alive, it is one of those things that just sneaks up on you and kills everybody. It's kind of like having a little dog. Our little dog's that way. Like, it'll just be laying there, and I'm like, I just look at all the girls, I'm like, which one of you did that? And we all know. You can always blame it on Molly. That's what we know. So there's a 5-pound dog that could just run you out of the room. There are things in our lives that are lurking just beneath the surface and try to kill us. Now, if you're here for the first time, I want to tell you something about the group of people you're around, because I know you've got questions. I want you to know that this is a group of people that is not a group of people that just used to be people like you. We're not a group of people who tolerate people like you, and we're not a group of people who try to fix or change people like you. We're just a group of people just like you trying to figure out how to take our, what we call, next step toward Jesus. Because the truth of it is, there's two things that are really true. One, everybody in this room has parts of our story that we'd like to change or edit, things that we'd like to go back and do over again, things that I'd like to rewind and just forget ever happened. Just delete them and forget they ever happened. But we all can't. And the reality is there are also things in our future that we don't have in common. But the one thing that every one of us have in common today especially is that we all have a next step that we can take toward Jesus. And our hope after today is that you'll be able to identify and take a next step forward in your relationship with Jesus. That's what this whole place has always been about, certainly what it's about today. Man, you know, one of the things we're talking about particularly today is insecurity. Every single one of us have insecurity as a significant part of our life. And I don't mean most of us. I don't mean the guy behind you. I don't mean the person in front of you. I don't mean that you're the only one, because you have a tendency to think that, right? When we start to feel insecure, don't you feel like you're the only one who thinks this way? You're the only one who kind of has that issue. Don't you feel like you're the only one who doesn't have that one thing? I want you to know something. This is at the root of a lot of what we're talking about. In fact, last night, Sheila and I were talking a little bit about this, and Sheila said to me, I don't know if this is a God thought or a Sheila thought, and I always know that that's usually means it's a God thought. And she goes, I don't know if it's a God thought or a Sheila thought, but isn't insecurity kind of at the root of all of these things? Isn't it at the root of our comparison? Isn't it the reason we keep so busy? Isn't it the reason that we kind of try and rub things around, just trying to get like easy way out because we don't want to deal with all the fact that we don't feel like we have what it takes? But every single one of us have insecurity as a part of our life. Maybe your insecurity comes from the fact that when you were a kid, maybe you didn't have such a great relationship with one of your parents, or you were deprived a relationship with one of them, or maybe both of them. And so now your insecurity comes from the feeling that you're going to be abandoned. Maybe your insecurity comes from like maybe when you were a kid, you just didn't have a lot of cash, and there wasn't any extra money around, and you were always afraid that you weren't going to have the next meal. And so now your insecurity is more on the financial side, and you feel this anxiousness, like you're not going to be able to have another meal, or this, even though it's clearly okay and everything's all right, you just still have that anxiety, that fear, that insecurity about it. Maybe something happened to you. Somebody said something or somebody did something when you were younger. Maybe it was last week or 2 years ago. And they did something and it hurt you so deeply that now you're insecure and you're fearful about it. And the truth of it is that it's been undermined and you're like, man, I don't know how to operate. Sometimes we are so insecure and it's so prevalent and so part of our everyday life that we don't even recognize that it's there. It's like the soundtrack that happens in the back. Insecurity is constantly playing its way out in our life. The truth is, you're probably asking this question. How do you know that? How do you know that? Like, there's a part of it, people will come to me after church and they'll go, you got to start talking to somebody else, man, because you're just talking to me all the time. These other 200 or 300 people are going to get mad about it, and if you just only talk to me, that's just the way this is. It happens a lot. People ask, how do you know that about me? How do I know that you're dealing with insecurity? Because I don't know you that well. I mean, some of you I know really well. I mean, some of you I know kind of well, and some of you I don't really know that well, or maybe not even at all. So the question you'd have to have is, how do I know that about you? How do I know that you deal with insecurity as much as you do? I'll tell you why. It's not because I know you. It's because I know our enemy. And our enemy he's not creative. He's just consistent. He doesn't try to come up with new ways. He just does the same thing over and over and over again. And what he does, Jesus tells us, it's super clear. Jesus said that I came so that you could have life. The enemy comes so to steal, kill, and destroy. He wants to wipe the legs out from every one of us and destroy our life. Most of all, our identity. He wants us to misunderstand, misuse, misinterpret. He wants us to completely miss the story when it comes to who we are. Not our identity like that's on our identification, right? Not just our name, our address, and our phone number. Not our social security number. He's not after the identification that you carry around. He's after how you look at you, how you see and interpret you. He wants to undermine every bit of who you think you are and how significant and valuable and important you are. He wants to undermine that and steal it from you. And to do that, he attacks us in ways that he comes up and he sneaks up and he tells us things that aren't true in moments of pain. And then we make agreements with that and operate with it all of our life. It happens every day. When we experience difficult things, the enemy tells us something. Here's the thing. He can't walk up to you and sweep the legs out from under your identity by just telling you aren't. What he does is he convinces you to tell you that you aren't. He doesn't walk up to you and tell you that you aren't loved. He doesn't walk up to you and tell you that you aren't God's child. He doesn't want him to do those things. What he does is he gets you to tell you that. Because when you tell you that, it seems much more dependable. The enemy doesn't ever come up and just tell you a lie. He gets you to tell you a lie. And that's the root of our insecurity. Our insecurity is really our response to the enemy's efforts or the attempts on the enemy to steal our identity. You and I are created by God's hand for God's glory. I mean, Colossians chapter 1, verses 16 and 17 says that you and I are created by him and for him. We have our authorship in him. We're sustained by him. Our purpose is in him. He gave us value and purpose and meaning. The enemy wants to steal that from us. Our insecurities, all of them, our body image insecurities, our financial insecurities, our emotional insecurities, all of our insecurities. Every fear in your life is the result of the enemy's attempt to steal your identity. It's true of every single one of us. It's true through every person throughout time because the enemy's not creative. He's just consistent. And here's the thing that is true, is that we know what's true. We know the information, right? We could look at some books and go, okay, yes, I understand that I'm valued. I understand that I'm the daughter of the king. I understand that I understand who I am. We could understand all of the information that's contained here. We can take all of this information and put it into list form and store it away in the left half of our brain. But I want us to understand something. If we store this information in our brain without a connection to our emotions, then what we do is we wind up having a short circuit and we never are able to heal how we feel. And if we can't heal how we feel, we'll never be able to change how we think. If we can't heal how we feel, we'll never be able to change how we think because our body isn't designed for that. Now I want you to kind of take that morsel and stock it away for a minute. If we can't heal what we feel, we'll never change how we think. Put that away for a minute because we're going to talk through the story, particularly of a man named Saul. And Saul is a big character in the Old Testament, very important player in his deal. And we're going to talk about it because he knows the information. But if we can't heal how we feel, then we can't change how we think. So understand this is how this thing goes. Put that away. We're going to look at Saul. Saul's a killer story. And if you're not familiar with it, don't feel bad about it, because not a lot of people are. It's a great story in the Old Testament, but what it boils down to is that God has a plan for Israel. And God tells Israel over and over again, I want to be your king. I want to be king, and I want you to follow me. I want to be king. I want you to follow me. He says that to him, but Israel's like us when a new iPhone comes out, right? You like the new iPhone comes out, and you're like, I don't really want that. I'm good. And then everybody has one. And the next thing you know, you're like, okay, I kind of want that. Like you have this fear of missing out, right? They call it FOMO, right? I'm fearful of missing out on something. Like I don't really want it until everybody else has it, and then I'm like, well, I don't want to miss something everybody else is doing. And so we get that thing. So I get it. Maybe it's not for you. Maybe the iPhone's not a big deal. Maybe you're a Samsung user, and then you just are missing out. So, but the thing is that maybe some of you are like, them's fighting words now. Come on. So you can talk about camo if you want, but don't talk about my phone. But here's the deal. We have this fear of missing out, and that's exactly what Israel had. Israel was looking around, we're looking around, the landscape of the time they lived in, and everybody else had a king. Everybody else had a royal family. Everybody else had this whole pomp and circumstance about it. Everybody else had the cool thing, and they're like, we want a king, and we want to be like them. And so they kept telling God, we want a king like everybody else has a king. They all have a king. We want a king. They have royalty. We have royalty. They have a royal family. We have a royal family. They're up at 4:30 in the morning watching their wedding on TV, and we want to be up at 4:30 in the morning watching our wedding. Come on. These are the jokes, people. Wake up. Okay. But the thing is, they're saying we just feel like we're missing out. And so they tell God this, and God says, no, I want to be your king. God says, look, I'll give them what they want. And often is the case, God gives us what we want, even if what we want is not good for us. He gives us what we want when we're persistently wanting it, and he allows us to have it, and even if it's not good for us, and he calls Saul as the king. Saul's not a good king. He kind of sucks at it, okay? So he would have been in this series, Things That Suck. This series sucks, what we did before this. Saul kind of sucked as king because he didn't really do a great job of it. He was kind of motivated by himself, and things were kind of messy, and he didn't do a very good job at some really, really important things. In fact, there was one place where God actually comes and says, hey, look, you're no longer going to be king. You're no longer fit for it. And he sends Samuel to come in and talk to him. And here's this instance, and we're going to kind of look at the end and then back up and look at the beginning. But here's this moment where Samuel comes to see Saul and to tell him, listen, you don't have what it takes. God's removing you as king. You no longer are going to be this deal. And he comes to him, and this is what he says to him in chapter 15. He says this, Samuel told him, though you may think little of yourself. I was just talking with somebody between services, and they said, I've seen Saul's story over and over and over again, and I always just thought of it as arrogance. Isn't that arrogance played out? It's just somebody who thinks little of themselves and trying to overcompensate. But Samuel comes up to him and says, listen, although you think little of yourself, are you not the leader of the tribes of Israel? Do you see what's going on? I mean, Saul knows in his head, in the left half of his brain, in the portion of his brain that handles the details and the information and the lists, on that half of his brain, he knows that he's the leader of the Israelites. He knows all the information, but he doesn't feel significant. He feels insecure, and because he knows the right information but doesn't feel that way, he has this gap in his performance. So he doesn't think of himself very highly. He thinks little of himself. Although you think little of yourself, don't you know that you're the leader of the Israelites? Don't you know that you're God's man for this job? Isn't that the case for all of us? I mean, isn't that how we all play out? That we know information, right? We can hear a sermon, we can listen to something, we can read a book, and we go, yes, I agree. I know all those things. But why don't I feel differently? Because if we can't heal the way we feel, we'll never change the way we think. And this is important for us because we've got to lean into what's going on behind the story. Now, we rewind it, right? That's the end. Samuel comes in and says, although you don't feel that significant about yourself, there's something going on that you don't know. You don't see who you are, and how you feel about it don't match up. See what insecurity has done in his life. And it does this in all of our lives. If we back up to the beginning of this kind of story, this is when God installs Saul as the king. God's chosen him. He puts him out, and he's chosen because he's head and shoulders taller than everyone else. He's in a land of short little people. I mean, I'm not being racist here, but the Israelites are not known for their height. They don't have like a great basketball team, right? So they're not known for their height. There's this guy, Saul, who's literally taller than everyone else. And everyone sees him. Everybody knows who he is because he's taller than everyone else. And God chooses him, and they go to install him as king. And look what happens in chapter 10. It says this. Then he brought each family of the tribe of Benjamin. So he brought the whole tribe of Benjamin together. This is where Saul's insecurity comes from. Benjamin's the smallest tribe of all of the 12 tribes. Brings all the families together of the tribe of Benjamin. And then the Lord from the family of the Matrites. I don't know. You can figure out how you want to pronounce it. The Matrites were chosen. You can make it up. That's what pastors do anyways. Are chosen. And then finally Saul, the son of Kish, was chosen from among them. So see what's going on. God convenes all of the tribe of Benjamin, and then he narrows it down to one family, and then he narrows it down to Saul. Now, what we're seeing here is a demonstration of really what is the source, or some of the source, of Saul's his own struggle and his insecurity. He's from the smallest tribe. He's from the smallest family. He's insignificant in terms of everything except for one physical trait that everybody seems to notice, but he misses everything else. And he feels so insecure about it that he's literally hiding while God's pulling everybody together. God gets everybody together, and he's nowhere to be found. God goes to install Saul as the leader. And he says, finally Saul, son of Kish, was chosen from among them. But when they looked for him, they couldn't find it. Where had he disappeared to? So they literally are looking for it. So they asked the Lord, hey, where is Saul? What happened to him? Where did he go? And the Lord replied, he's hiding among the baggage. He's over by the supplies, hiding out. Like literally, he's so scared, so insecure that he hides. Now, I know none of us have ever done that, right? None of us ever hide when we feel unsafe. None of us ever run away when we feel insecure. Yeah, right. Isn't that what we all do? I mean, when we deal with our insecurity, it causes us to hide. We pull away from things. When we're insecure about being around people, we kind of have a tendency to not be around them. When someone makes us feel insecure, we hide from them because insecurity causes us to hide. It causes us to just run away. What are we running away from? What are you hiding from? Even right now, even as you're considering this insecurity that you're experiencing, what are you hiding from? Are you hiding from relationships because you've been hurt? Now you feel insecure? Are you hiding from financial freedom? Are you hiding from it because you're afraid that if I don't hoard all this money that we won't have enough? Are you hiding in your fear from that? Are you hiding from friendships because you're afraid of how it'll make you feel? Are you hiding from the potential that you could see in life because of it? Insecurity causes us to hide. It did it for Saul. It does it for us all the time. We have a tendency to hide when we feel insecure. Nobody wants to be exposed, right? Especially not in their area of insecurity. So we have a tendency to hide. And I don't know about you, but it's not fun to live there. I mean, like Saul could not have lived long-term among the supplies, although he had all the supplies he needed, I guess. But he could not have lived long-term there, right? He'd have to come out at some point. We can't live in a way where we're separated like that. Hiding is not a great place to be. And you can exist there for a minute, but it can't for very long. The story goes on, and God installs Saul, and he gets up and running and kind of gets the whole kingdom going a little bit. And then God calls Saul to do something very specific. It's in the beginning of chapter 15. It says this. I'm just going to read this out of verse 3, but it says this. Now go and completely destroy the Amalekite nation, men, women, children, babies, cattle, sheep, goats, camels, and donkeys. I know that sounds a little freaky when we read this stuff. We're like, destroy babies and camels. Who really cares about donkeys? But like that just seems like a lot of stuff to do. So Saul mobilized his army at Telaim. There were 200,000 soldiers from Israel and 100,000 or 10,000 from Judah. Then Saul, his army, went to the town of the Amalekites and lay in wait in the valley. So eventually he says he kind of mobilizes his army. God tells him what to do because these people have kind of been oppressed, they've been oppressing the Jews since they left Egypt. And so God sends him and says, Saul, I want you to go take the armies and go do this. So he gets there, he gets the armies, 210,000 guys, and he hides them all in the, just kind of in the lay in wait in this valley, waiting for them to come through. And he warns another group of people and he says, hey guys, you need to separate yourself from these people because we're about to lay waste to the joint, right? And it's going to be a big deal. And if you stick around, you're going to get mixed in with them. So he tells them. And so then, this says, then Saul slaughtered the Amalekites, Hivlah, and the way to Shur, east of Egypt. He captured Agag, the Amalekite. Oh my goodness, you get the idea. But he completely I've practiced this 35 times. I still can't get it right, okay? But anyways, he completely destroyed everyone else. Saul and his men spared Agag's life and kept the best of the sheep and the goats and the cattle, fat calves, and the lambs. Everything, in fact, that appealed to them. They destroyed only what was worthless or of poor quality. Now, do you see the difference? What happens when we live in hiding? We live in fear. We kind of back away and we start there. God calls them out, installs him as king. He says, hey, you guys wanted a king. This is your king. Makes him king, and then he calls him to do something, and he says, I want you to waste everything. I want you to slaughter everything, but he does most of it. And in fact, if you look at it, he does all the stuff that you and I would have questions about, right? He does all the things like the men and the women, the children, the babies, all that stuff, but what he doesn't do is the things that are understandable, right? He doesn't slaughter any of the animals. He doesn't do any of those things. He keeps them for himself. And he keeps the king because he wants to show his authority. He wants to show he has a king serving him. And he has all this insecurity that just seems to be really kind of awkward. So when he comes in and he says, God says, all right, Samuel, it's over. Saul doesn't have what it takes. And like I said to him, he says, go and find him. And so Saul is looking for him in verse 12. He goes to look for him. Samuel's looking for him. He says, early the next morning, Samuel went to find Saul. Someone told him, Saul went to the town of Carmel to set up a monument for himself. I mean, I was talking to that person between service, and they were talking about how they always read this as arrogance. And it does seem arrogant, doesn't it? Doesn't it just seem like he's just like so pompous and arrogant, that he's just so full of himself, that he's got it all he halfway does what God tells him to do, and then he goes and makes a monument to himself, and he kind of probably feels a little bit like, I'm not going to get God's praises for doing this, so I might as well get my own, right? Man, isn't this what happens? Our insecurity causes us to overcompensate. I mean, isn't that really what's going to happen? We overcompensate when we feel insecure. I mean, in my mind, it's like a short guy that is insecure about the fact that in his manliness. So what does he do? He goes and buys the biggest truck he can get with the biggest tires that he'll never take off road, like that kind of thing. Or just have this overcompensation. And you're going, man, I get it if you want to be into trucks, but that just seems a little much, doesn't it? I mean, isn't that how we do this on a regular basis? In everyday life, isn't that what we do? We develop these false images of who we are to keep us from really hitting on the things that are the deepest pains in our life. We develop our false self to defend us from ever having to deal with the fact that we're really insecure about these things. Isn't that where our addictions come from? Isn't that where our mess starts? Where we're like, yeah, I don't want to deal with that part of my life. I don't want to be made to feel that way. I don't want to be. So I have a tendency to hold people at arm's length because I'm insecure about this. Our insecurities cause us to overcompensate. And I know you're going, man, I don't know if I'm overcompensating. I'm really into that. But are you? Is there really something beneath it? Isn't that really where all of our anger comes from? When we lash out at the kids, isn't it a lot of times it's because you feel insecure about your parenting? Isn't it when we kind of deal with these things, isn't it when we make the worst choices? When we're in a relationship with someone, like for instance, when you're in a dating relationship and he or she's pressuring you towards sex, and you're going, I don't know if I want to, but I don't want to lose this thing, so we compensate and we give up something that we didn't want to do in the first place. Or when we begin to feel insecure, isn't that when we go and talk to someone that we shouldn't be talking to and begin a relationship that we shouldn't, because we feel insecure and that person makes me feel okay? Isn't that the constant story of our compensation? That we put up these walls that make us feel safe. They really aren't making us safe. They just make us feel better for a minute. I promise you this. The insecurity will be back. It's not going away. It's not going away no matter what Band-Aid we put on it, no matter how we compensate for it. The minute we're alone, we'll feel insecure again, because the enemy is not creative. He's just consistent in the way he tries to wipe the legs out from under our identity. It matters that we identify those false pieces of our story where we're hiding behind our overcompensation. The story goes on, and Saul is in this interchange, and Samuel comes up to him and says to him, though you're small in your own eyes, and he says, what happened with the Amalekites? And Saul's like, oh, well, we did that. We went there and we kicked butt, take names. We figured it out. We're done. We're finished with that stuff. And Samuel says to him, well, if you did that, then why am I hearing sheep? Why am I hearing these things going on behind the scenes? And Saul, like it's all hit the fan now, right? It's all real. It's all out in the open. He knows that he's played out, and his overcompensation hasn't hidden him. He knows all this stuff is gone, and he has no more defenses. And so he's face to face with the reality of who he is, and then he admits it. And look at this in verse 24. He says this, then Saul admitted to Samuel. He says to Samuel, yes, I've sinned. I have disobeyed your instructions and the Lord's command, for I was afraid of the people. Isn't that really how it is for us? I was afraid of the people. At some point in our life, our insecurity diminishes the value of God's command and increases the value of people's voices. It decreases the value we place on obedience to God and doing things he wants us to do so that we can fully understand who we are in him. And it increases the value of all the people around us, the people who make us feel like we're better. Do you see what's going on? That if we can change the way we feel, then we'll be able to change the way we think. Insecurity causes us to live out of fear, causes us to be afraid. When we're fully confident in who we are in Jesus, when we're fully confident in our identity and our created identity, that we're created by his hand and for his glory, when we know full well in our heart of hearts, when we feel completely connected and understand our value in terms of God and his relationship to us and our identity in him, then the way we think can be healed. When we fully understand that, the voices people have, they don't really have that loud of a voice. But when we diminish the value of God's identity in us, the voices around us get so much louder. And then we make poor choices. It's the same thing that Saul's saying. He's like, I know I sinned. I know I did what was wrong, but I was afraid of the people. Because over the years, he'd listened so much to the undermining of his identity, that these voices around him became so loud that he couldn't ignore them. So what's the deal? What should we do? Because here's the trouble. The hope for our healing isn't just in what we know. I mean, it's like I said earlier, we could put all of this information just as information. We could put all of this information, store it away, and put it in the left half of our brain, where we understand and get information and details and stuff, right? We can get the lists and we can get all the information there, and you can know by heart every piece of that. You just know it right off the top of your head, all the pieces of information, and still never feel secure. And you know why that is? Neurologists will tell you that your body, our whole thinking process works from bottom to top, right to left. It works from bottom to top, right to left. It all starts in our spinal cord. The information to do something goes from our spinal cord, and then our brain interprets that and says, hey, the right half of our brain interprets that and says, hey, I need to do this. I feel the need to make this a compensation or to do this action. And then it moves to our left brain, which processes the right list of information. We don't move from logical to action. We move from that impulse to feeling to action. So if we want to see God work in healing our insecurity, then we not only need to know the right things. That's important, don't get me wrong. It's vital that we know, but it isn't just in what we know. We have to ask God to heal how we feel. If we're really going to find triumph, if we're really going to find traction in healing our insecurity, then we have to ask Jesus to heal how we feel. Now, the first step in that is you got to believe that Jesus is capable of healing. If you feel like Jesus is incapable of healing your brokenness, then I got news for you. You're going to be broken, because that's not the way this works. That's the reason that there's so much good news in the good news. That's the reason it's not just a raise your hand and check a box or walk an aisle or get in some water kind of relationship. The reason we're invited into a relationship is because he wants to make us whole and new, not just in one moment, but over time. Man, can you see why convenience is killing us? I mean, can you see why it's killing us? Because him healing the way we feel isn't going to happen in an instant. It's not something that we just go, hey, Jesus, heal the way I feel, and oh man, my insecurity is gone, right? It's something we have to lean into and depend on and let him work in our heart and heal the broken places in our heart so that we learn this developed relationship with him that heals our brokenness from the inside out. Do you see why convenience is killing us? Because we live in a world where if I push a button and it doesn't happen immediately, we don't think it's worth it. We don't think it's worth anything, and we don't think it's working. We're thinking, oh, well, it's worthless. Listen, it must be broken. It doesn't work for me. I tried religion. It doesn't work. I tried following on Jesus. It didn't work. How long did you try it? A week? 3 weeks, a month, a year, 2 years, right? I mean, that's how we do things, right? We try it for a little while, and then it doesn't work until we scratch it and throw it away. Healing for the way we feel is going to be a constant relational dependence on Jesus. We can't change the way we think until we heal the way we feel. And Jesus wants to be invited into that. I know that's not I'd love to just give you some simple answer, right? I'd love to say, oh, well, all you got to do is just say this prayer or do this thing or read this book. It's not that simple. I wish it was. But if it was that simple, it wouldn't be worth talking about for 30 minutes, right? If it was that simple, it wouldn't be worth talking about tonight at our discussion group. You don't want to miss that, by the way. You want to find healing from your insecurity. You want to take your next step out of it. Let's be together this afternoon. This will be good stuff. It's valuable for us to talk about how to experience healing in our lives. But let's start that together, would you? I mean, would that be valuable for us, right? To begin the process of healing right now? Why don't you do this? Why don't you close your eyes and don't look around? Not because it's how you pray, not because we're going to do something religious, but I just want to pray for you. In your own mind, bring up the image of your insecurity, what you're insecure about. Is it body image? Is it finances? Is it relational insecurity? What is it? Let's pray together. Jesus, we come to you now with a picture of where it is that we're broken. A picture of our insecurity, the battlefield on which the enemy has leveled attack after attack after attack related to our identity in you, the way we function, the way we look at ourselves. And we've tried everything. We've tried the reading, we've tried the information stuff, we've tried all the quick cures, but we know that the only way to heal this is to invite you into it. And so now, Jesus, we just picture you in our pain. We invite you into that. And we just ask, Jesus, that your Holy Spirit would begin ministering to us, would begin caring for our brokenness in the deepest places of our insecurity. I just pray that your Holy Spirit would give us strength to lean in on you and to depend on you as you begin the work of healing our brokenness. We ask that in your name. Amen.